Hello and welcome to the Something in the Wild podcast. I'm Tyler Smith with you as always, and I have a pretty interesting little episode for you guys today. First, I guess want to start off by talking about what's going on, in my week so far. And this week was actually my personal first opening day archery season for deer this year. It's finally upon us. The 2024 deer season is here in most of America. I'm sure some, there's some states that have October openers and stuff like that, which you guys will be listening to this on October 1st. So deer season's here, and how are we kind of tackling that? I know it's going to be a very long season, especially in Pennsylvania, where specifically where I'm at, near a couple of the population hubs, we have extended archery seasons. So basically what that means is, our archery season starts middle of September, doesn't end until the end of January. So we got September, October, November, December, January, 5 months out of the year that we can chase deer with our bows, and it is awesome. I have absolutely no complaints about that. I'm super excited, and I'll kind of run you through what happened on our first deer hunt. So like I had mentioned previously, I'm kind of teaching Sammy the ropes of how to hunt, things like that, and she wanted to kill a deer this year with a bow for her first ever animal that she wanted to kill. She wanted to be a deer. She wanted to be with a bow. Now, it's going to be a challenge for sure, but she's making great strides and super proud, super impressed. Been shooting her bow a lot, specifically in the backyard, trying to get her dialed in at around 20 yards, and I think that'll probably be our max for how far she's going to shoot in the field. But for this weekend, how that kind of ties in is I took her out for her first sit on stand. So we went out early Saturday morning, went to a spot that historically has pretty high deer numbers. Both went out there, hiked up this big, steep little cliff thing, and once we got to the top, we set up the tree stands and sat there for the morning. Got there at a pretty decent time, but we were a few minutes late because right as soon as we got set up and we were kind of getting everything situated for the end, or for the sit, a deer came in and blew at us and ran away the other way. I don't think it smelled us because it wasn't near where our wind was going. Our wind was kind of blowing behind us, and it was more front right. So I don't think it smelled us per se. I just think that it saw us moving, or it might have heard us moving around, shuffling around, and it booked it out of there. But that wasn't the only deer that we were going to see. We eventually, sat there for a couple hours, and it was probably around like 8:30 or so. And we hadn't seen a deer since that first one. We saw a bunch of turkeys, which was cool. Saw a whole flock of hens with some poults, running around with them, and they were going crazy. They were, making a whole racket. It was really, really cool to experience, but wasn't what we were there for. We were there for deer, and around 8:30 or so, we hadn't seen any more deer. So I was like, all right, let's give it until 9, because I could tell Sam was probably getting a little bit bored. So let's wait until 9, and then if 9 comes around, we don't see anything, let's hit the road. So literally probably like 2-3 minutes after I said that, Sammy points down at the creek bottom, and she's like, there's a deer down there. And I was like, oh, crap. So I pulled up my binoculars. I was trying to look. I couldn't find it, but I definitely believe it was down there. So I was like, well, that's a good sign. And after that happened, we kind of gave it a few more minutes. Like 5 minutes later, I see movement out of the corner of my eye towards like front right, kind of where that deer was coming from, but this one was coming more up from the creek bottom, and it was a buck. I was like, holy crap. And not only was it a buck, it was a nice deer. 100% legal. I think it was an 8. I think it was an 8 point. Little bit narrow, but it was still a nice deer. And I was absolutely, I was planning on shooting anything legal that came by, to be honest. I haven't really set out many trail cams this year because I set out trail cams last year and it kind of ruined my expectations for the hunt and just wasn't something that I was interested in doing. I wanted more of the excitement of what's back here. So I opted out of trail cam usage. I do have a trail cam sitting right now that's collecting data, hopefully. But I haven't checked it. It's just kind of soaking there right now. But so ended up seeing this deer, walked up, and it walked up this hill. I think it might have seen us a little bit, maybe not though, but it started walking away. And I was like, crap, I don't think we're gonna get a shot at this. I had my bow in my hand and everything, and walking away, and then it turned. And then it kind of started working its way back towards us, but it was being very, very cautious, working very, very slowly. And I could tell it definitely knew something was up. It knew that we were up there. I mean, it's hard to conceal two people in a tree. So all I was doing, I was just telling Sammy, don't move, don't move, don't move, because I knew any little movement that deer saw, he was going to be gone. Just based on experience. I made that mistake plenty of times before. I was trying to limit it here. So that deer starts walking up, and it's moving in close. And in this brush, we're kind of brushed in. Like there's a lot of brush in the area that we were hunting, very, very thick. So this deer is within 20, I would say even closer to like 12 yards, like 12 to 15 yards it was at. And it was behind these bushes over here, and walking, and then it stopped, and it would look at us every couple steps. And all it needed to take was like two more steps forward, and it would have been right in an open shooting lane that I had. And I was 100% ready. I had my bow in hand, and I was ready to start drawing back. And right before he started walking forward, the wind blew. The wind blew like kind of behind us a little bit, and Sammy thought it was a deer behind us, another deer behind us, and she turned her head real quick and then turned back, and that deer did not like that, and he just walked away. Briskly walked away, just straight over the top. And I was like, had my bow. I was like, no. And we're gonna post a video of this whole hunt on the YouTube, so go check that out. It's gonna come out on Thursday, and you can see my reaction. I was like, oh crap, that would have been a great opportunity to tag out early, especially on the opening weekend, which I have never done before. So anyway, that whole situation happened, and I was like, oh, you can't move like that. And I was like a little bit upset while it was going on, but it's okay, because that's part of the learning experience that I think cannot be like overstated. Is like you're not like, you can only learn that, you can only make that adjustment after you make that mistake in the field. And hopefully it hit home and we don't make that mistake anymore. So that's all good, all good and well. Early in the season, that was our opening weekend. I'm sure we'll have other opportunities, but it was really, really cool to kind of see that play out. And I think that I might have Sammy hooked because she really liked it as well. She didn't like the fact that I was blaming her for it running away, but she's gonna have to deal with that. So that was cool. And now I have to wait a whole entire week again. Oh wait, well I guess I can cover. We went back in the I went back personally, just myself went back in the afternoon and had some really, really good action. And you definitely want to check out the video to see how that ended up. I'll give you a little teaser there. So now I have to wait a whole nother freaking week to go out again, because can't go out on Sundays, which I have a huge gripe, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot about this year. This deer season is like the lack of Sunday hunting opportunity here in Pennsylvania. We only have 3 weekends we can go Sunday hunting, so it's just absolute nightmare. And the only way that it can really change is the PA legislation to allow Sunday hunting, and that comes from the governor, but that decision is not going to be made probably this year. Well, definitely not this year because the season dates are already in place. But with the election and everything, it is what it is. But right now, if you do want to expand those Sunday hunting opportunities, definitely send an email, call your legislator, the Pennsylvania legislator, and give them your 2 cents. Let them know that, hey, you're taking away opportunity for hunters, and if you do allow for Sunday hunting, that gives you an extra day. Like that basically doubles a lot of people's time that they can spend deer hunting. So that would be great, especially for people that can only really go out on weekends, which is like kind of the boat that I'm in. Like I have a job during the week. I'm very busy during the week, and I can't really be going out like at nights. It's tough for me because, say you do shoot a deer, you got to process it, you got to do all of that stuff, and by the time that you're done, it's like already really late at night, and so nevertheless, send an email to the PA legislation and get that changed. Okay, now on to some different kind of talking points. I have a note here. I want to give you guys some updates from Utah. So I mentioned this previously. The Utah is trying to force, through the Supreme Court, force the federal government to sell off all of the BLM land in Utah. So all of the public land, not all of it, but a lot of the public land in Utah, they want it sold to the state. And basically their argument is that so number one, they are requesting the Supreme Court to declare that the practice of the federal government retaining these unappropriated lands within Utah's borders over the state's objection is unconstitutional. And two, that the clauses within FLPMA allow the federal government to indefinitely retain unappropriated lands and implement that policy. And third demand for the court to order the United States to begin the process of disposing of its unappropriated federal lands within Utah, consistent with existing rights and state law. I just do not understand. I mean, first of all, say that the BLM sells this land to Utah. The amount of money that it's going to take to manage that land is way beyond what they're collecting in taxes. Way beyond. So the state of Utah loses because they have to pay way more in taxes if they're going to keep this land. The second option that could happen from this is that they realize, oh crap, all these taxes we got to pay. We can't manage, or all these taxes that we need to collect. We can't manage this land with the money that we have. We have to sell it. Okay, then all of Utah loses again. So Utah loses first. Utah loses again if they try and sell all this land, like the Utah residents. And I'm not talking about like filthy rich people that are going to be buying this land, or the government of Utah that's going to be making money from selling the land. Now I'm talking about just the regular everyday people of Utah are going to suffer because all of this public land that is accessible by everyone is going to be sold off. And if you think, oh, that's not going to happen, that Utah would never do that. Utah's already done that before. So just a real sketchy situation, and hoping the Supreme Court is going to make a good decision here. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to play out. This is kind of new, but the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Association, they're going to be covering this very thoroughly. Same with Meat Eater, I'm sure. All those kind of conservation organizations are going to be keeping a very close eye at this and really making sure that nothing too rash happens. So be sure to stay up to date with that. I'll be talking about that more, I'm sure. But those are kind of like the active things that are going on right now. But yeah, just a real unfortunate situation in Utah. And once that, like a lot of things, once that verbiage gets passed in the Supreme Court, then it can be transferred to other states, which is a huge no-no, because if that happens, I mean, a lot of states, like once land gets sent to private, like the state government, it becomes increasingly more regulated. Like, for example, in Pennsylvania, we have the Allegheny National Forest in north central Pennsylvania, like northwest central kind of. But that's federal land. You can camp anywhere, hunt anywhere, managed by the federal government. And I love it up there. It's awesome. Now, if you go to the state-owned public land, which I am very grateful for Pennsylvania. They have some good state-owned policies where they have the Game Commission owns state game lands. We have state forests. We have state parks, a lot of which you can hunt in. But my one gripe with that is the accessibility to primitive camping, where you could just go wherever, dispersed camping, where you could just go wherever and just set up a tent camp there. That is my one gripe, because you're not allowed to do it on state game land. A lot of state parks don't allow it, and the state forests used to allow it, but now things are kind of changing. They got a new someone new that's managing the state forests, the DCNR, managing the DCNR, and they're taking away those opportunities. Now you got to pay for permits and things like that and all of that stuff, and it's just such a freaking pain. Like, you're already taking a lot of my money. Like, just I could keep going into that, but I'm not going to. But that's a topic for a different discussion. So just keeping public lands in the trust for the people, keeping it in the hands of the federal government, because it takes so freaking long for them to change anything, that a lot of the times you can fight it and eventually keep it in public hands. So that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to keep the public land in public hands, like BHA always says. So be sure to stay up to date with that. Now let's move into some more news across the country, conservation news, that is. And the first thing I want to talk about was the new appointment of Angie Bruce. So she is the new Fish and Game director in Wyoming. So she has recently come from Iowa. So she spent her career before Wyoming in Iowa for 20 years, and was responsible for a lot of Iowa's first comprehensive fish and wildlife plans. She's done a bunch of extended work in habitat improvement, migration corridor protections, and all that stuff is super important. That is where 90% of the population health relies on habitat and migration corridors, especially out west. So the fact that she has work, she's done work, she has experience in that habitat improvement, the migration corridor protections, great stuff. Absolutely love to hear that. Although I will say that Iowa is a very, very hard state to get a tag. Wyoming, also very, very hard state to get a tag. So I'm hoping that with, more habitat improvement, migration corridor work, those tags get a little bit easier. I know that's a far stretch. But nevertheless, hoping that she does a good job. This does come in light. This new transition comes in light of that recent wolf torturing issue that was out there in Wyoming, in Cody, Wyoming. And I'm hoping that they handle that properly. Just because it's a bad situation for sure, but it was kind of like a lightning rod for animal rights activists and extremists, where they're like, well, this is what happens whenever you can kill wolves. And I think that Wyoming has done a great job of managing the wolf population. I mean, it's very healthy there in Wyoming. Same with the mountain lion population, and they don't really have any control over the grizzly population, but they are trying to change that. So I'm just hoping that they stick with their management plan. I'm all for making like more stringent laws in place, like regarding wildlife, utilization, I guess. I mean, there are laws in place, but making the punishments a little bit more severe, I think, would be beneficial to help deter that sort of activity. But yeah, so all the best to her. Hope she does well. Hopefully I can get out there in Wyoming and do some hunting and fishing in the coming years, and hopefully she does a good job where it's even more accessible for me, which would be good. Next, let's talk about the Colorado wolves. So this has been a huge topic for the past year now, since the this initiative to reintroduce wolves into Colorado got passed in 2020, but it took years for them to get a state that actually wanted to donate them wolves. And now they're trying to expand that, and so they originally got wolves from, I believe it was Washington, somewhere in the northwest, the Pacific Northwest. But now they're trying to pull in wolves from British Columbia too, to be introduced into Colorado. And if we've learned anything from Montana, that's just not a great idea. This thing's been a mess from the very beginning. It tends to happen. This messy stuff tends to happen when you try and force animals into an area that might not be ready for them to be there. And not saying that wolves don't belong in Colorado. They're native there. They've been there for thousands of years. So I'm all for wolves being in Colorado, but I just don't think that that Coloradans specifically and the state as a whole is ready for this. I mean, this is what happens whenever you have citizens that, especially a state like Colorado, where half of it, 90% of the state is rural area. It's backcountry, backwoods, country folk, and then you have one major population hub in Denver, where 90% of the votes are coming from. And you have all these people voting in this population hub that are not as connected to the land as these people that are out, like, living amongst these animals, living amongst wolves, ranching, hunters, anglers that are spending their time outside, relying on elk meat, relying on deer meat, relying on bear meat, relying on mountain lion meat to help sustain them throughout the year. Those aren't the people whose voices are being heard. The people whose voices are being heard are the people that are in Denver that are like, oh yeah, that'd be nice to have wolves, whenever they don't really understand, what exactly that means. It means that, yes, you're going to have a more diverse ecosystem. Those wolves are going to be able to protect against population diseases in elk, in mule deer. But you also have to remember that these wolves, whenever they were in Colorado, they had an insane food resource in buffalo, in bison. There was 30 to 40 million bison in the West. And these wolves, that was a main source of their diet was bison. And now you remove that, now they have to rely on elk and mule deer. So just an absolute mess from the very beginning. I'm curious to see how things end up here, but they recently just had to move the Copper Creek pack, which was the first pack. So the Copper Creek pack had been responsible for 24 depredation cases since December. That's a lot. And one of them was killed by a mountain lion. So one of the Copper Creek pack was killed by a mountain lion, and one was killed during the relocation due to the depredation. So the Copper Creek pack, the original pack that they introduced into Colorado, was moved, or had to be relocated due to depredation. And that, 24 depredation cases is a lot, specifically for such a small pack. There was only like 4 of them or 5 of them, maybe 6. I'm not 100% sure on the number, but that's not a lot. That's not a very great ratio. So, I know there's a lot of stuff in place for ranchers to non-lethal deterrence for ranchers, livestock dogs, flashing lights on their fences, sirens, things like that. There's a bunch of different tools that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife are offering to these ranchers, but you can have all the tools in the world. If these ranchers don't feel like they're being heard, and you don't have the buy-in from them, this isn't going to be successful. It's just not, because you got to think, like with anything, with any new law, with any new rule, with anything like that, you have to have buy-in from your people. And whenever people feel like they're not being heard, then they're not going to buy into the whole situation. It's the same thing with, like, say you're working at your job and your boss tells you, okay, you need to do this. You need to go scrub the floor. But if you're, say you're going to scrub the floor, but then there's going to be a bunch of people walking past with dirty feet in 10 minutes, and then there's not going to be no one after that. Like, you're not going to buy into cleaning the floor now, because then you're going to have to do it again later, So, like, just getting buy-in from your citizens is the first step in making this possible. And like I said, whenever your citizens feel like they're not being heard, they're not going to buy in, and they're not going to take all of the necessary steps to help preserve the pack, help make sure that it's healthy. It's just not going to happen. So, that's what they got to focus on first before they start bringing in just a bunch of wolves just to overrun the place with wolves and see what happens. It just flies in the face of scientific-based wildlife management and the American model for wildlife management. So I hope that Colorado kind of turns things around here a little bit. It's unfortunate what's going on, but it can't. It's not that it can't be fixed. So hopefully they can figure some things out, and I look forward to tracking that progress throughout the coming years. It will definitely be interesting. And also that the Initiative 91 for the mountain lion ban is coming up soon too. So that'll be something to cover as well. But we can talk about that once the election arrives. But other than that, that's all I got for you today. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Again, be sure to check out that video that's coming out on Thursday. It'll be very, very interesting. A lot of meat grinding, a lot of cooking, a lot of hunting. It's going to be fun. So thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and make sure to keep it wild.